everybody. Welcome to the next installment of Journey Through John. This is where we have a bite-sized chunk of scripture, a little discussion, and a little challenge at the end, and I hope that this can be a resource for you to jump into your word every day. Today we're continuing on through John chapter 12, and we'll be going through the second half of verse 36 all the way through verse 43. Once again, this is where things are getting a little bit heavier because Jesus is within the week of the cross, and so he's having some very serious discussions with his with disciples and with those he comes in contact with. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this. It says in the second half of verse 36, he says, "When Jesus had said these things, he departed and hid himself from them. Though he had done so many signs before them, they still did not believe in him." Once again, that's that thread. That's what I've been talking about through John. They still didn't quite get it. So that the word spoken by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. Another prophecy. "Lord, who has believed what he heard from us? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?" Therefore they could not believe. For again, Isaiah said, "He has blinded their eyes, he has hardened their heart, lest they see with their eyes and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them." Verse 41, Isaiah said these things because he saw his glory and spoke of him. Verse 42, this is important here. This is why I think we see something for us to hold on to today. "Nevertheless, many even of the authorities believed in him, but out of fear of the Pharisees, they did not confess it, so that they would not be put out of the synagogue. For they loved the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God." That is a huge weight right there. And I think that there's a lot for us to choose or to dig into with that. As we see this going on, we see once again that Jesus is just fulfilling prophecy over and over and over again. The likelihood of this is not just improbable, it's impossible. He had to be exactly who he said he was. Now we can ridicule these people because they were saying, well, I believe in him, but I'm not going to say anything about it because I don't want to be kicked out of the synagogue, and I don't want there to be like between other Jewish businesses. Some people won't do business with me if I can proclaim Jesus as the Messiah. And so what we see is almost this mafia mentality that the Pharisees have on the Jewish community in Jerusalem. And it's that protection plan. You want our protection, right? They almost have that kind of stranglehold on the Jewish people. And so people, even if they believed him, they wouldn't confess for out of fear. And, you know, it's a heavy thing. But the thought that comes to my mind is, what meager earthly treasures do we settle for so we can avoid difficulty? And I think sometimes that it can creep into our mind as well. Because see, this isn't a Pharisee stranglehold necessarily. This is a sin stranglehold. This is what our enemy uses to cause deception. And he gives us some of the comforts of life, or says that these comforts of life must be what you have. Now, I'm not saying that you should go and sell everything you have necessarily, unless the Spirit of God's leading you to do that. But what I am saying is that sometimes our motivation for doing things, motivation for what we do, as far as even a job, motivation for what we do in the type of work we want to do, the motivation we want to push our kids into even, is oftentimes so you can have a comfortable life. You can have your home, you can have all the creature comforts of this world, and that's the motivation behind why we do a lot of the things we do. Now, I'm not against those things. I mean, I have air conditioning in my home. I'm completely okay with that, and I might whine a little bit if the air conditioning goes out. That's just one example. But is that my motivation? That's the question. Is that, it's nice to have those things? Is that very secondary? For example, is air conditioning more secondary to me, or is finding someone to walk alongside and tell them about Jesus' discipleship, is that very secondary? If I didn't have if I had to choose somehow between either discipling someone, I know this sounds crazy, but between discipling someone or having air conditioning, which one is a bigger motivation for me? I know it sounds crazy, but let me just, I want to point out the fact that sometimes we make heavenly riches and the things we invest in this earth for the heaven's purpose very secondary, so that we can push into the things that this earth has to offer us. We're willing to sacrifice discipleship so I can work more hours, so I can have more money to have fill in the blank. And I'm not trying to be hypercritical, but I'm just wanting us to evaluate this in our own life, because maybe the Spirit's been talking to us on this thing, and we've been kind of trying to not listen. What things that Jesus has commanded us to do as believers, as disciples in his word, are we making very secondary so that we can make sacrifices, so to speak, to have what we want to have, or have nicer than we need to have? What if we reeled this in a little bit so we could do more on this side? What would happen with that? That's just the challenge that I face. And I'm not, once again, I'm just as guilty as anybody else. I'm part of the culture here in Ohio, in America. We're Americans, we're rich people, and we don't feel like it sometimes, but we're rich people compared to the rest of the world. And so the question comes into, what is it that I'm sacrificing for? Am I sacrificing for eternal riches, or am I sacrificing for temporary riches? And what can I do? Spirit of God, show me, what can I do to make better choices in that area? That's just something that came to my mind. I don't want to be so afraid of what I'm not going to get. I don't want to be so afraid of other people. I don't want to be so afraid of losing my comfort that I'm not willing to serve Jesus. So that's our challenge for today. Something to pray about when you shut the video off. And let's see what God may reveal to you. I hope that encourages you, though, and I hope that challenges you. And I hope to see you again as we continue our journey through John.